My name is Kathleen Gagner. I'm from the Department of Electrical Engineering. Like I said, I'll be covering session 1, titled The Low Carbon Energy, the Science, the Reality, and the Future. So in this session, we had 3 speakers. The first was Sharon Hammes-Schiffer from the University of Illinois here in the chemistry department, and her talk was focused on catalyst design, specifically how catalysts are needed to effectively use renewable energy. She gave a compelling argument for the role theoretical chemists play in designing catalysts and their need, especially as we look for renewable energy sources. The second talk was by Kenneth Christensen from the University of Notre Dame, coming from the Department of Fluid Dynamics, and his talk was on international research, specifically the collaboration that's been formed between Illinois and a university in Japan, Kyushu University. And he was talking about the great opportunities that exist when you have that international collaboration, especially an interdisciplinary one, and the benefits that they've seen from leveraging international funding sources as well as international expertise, and how that's working well for them in the sustainability area. And the third talk was by Kenneth Gillingham from Yale, and he's a professor in economics, and he was talking about low carbon electricity. And he gave a very optimistic view of things that are happening in the renewable energy area, like was mentioned in the last talk, lowering of costs, increased investments in renewables, and favorable policies that will lead us to a renewable energy future. So the 3 takeaways: transforming the energy industry is an interdisciplinary endeavor. It's going to take chemists, it's going to take economists, it's going to take engineers. Everybody needs to bring their A game to the table, and all parties are needed. Second thing, transforming the energy industry is required at all levels, from state to international. So since it affects everyone needs to play their part, whether that's at a local level or at the international level where we see those cross collaborations. And third, possible. Transforming the energy industry is possible. Based on the great movement that's been happening in this whole conference, we see that things are moving towards a renewable energy future, though the reality side of that is there are still challenges ahead, but people are working on it, and we have much to be hopeful about. So with that, I will pass it to Chloe to talk about session 2.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you, Kathleen. I'm Chloe Mattia. I'm a graduate student at the University of Illinois in the Department of Crop Science, and I want to talk to you about session 2, where we talked about advanced biofuels. Are they a myth or are they the reality? Our first speaker was Dr. Evan DeLucia from here at the university in the Department of Plant Biology. And Dr. DeLucia explained how ecosystems have the capacity to regulate climate, and that land use changes involving ecosystems affect biogeochemical processes at planetary and local scales. And because of the high percentage of land in the United States that are under the corn-soybean rotation, taking the 40% of corn that goes into ethanol production and changing it to second-generation biofuels, such as miscanthus or switchgrass, has the capacity to create a net cooling effect. Dr. DeLucia's research has found that grass biofuels have a greater climate regulating potential. They act as a net sink for carbon rather than a source of carbon emissions, and this is at least when we're looking at the biogeochemical processes. Considering the social and economic challenges, biofuels have a greater capacity for success if we look at them or implement them on marginal land or non-prime cropland. We need to keep in mind that biodiversity and global economic issues are present, but overall bioenergy has a place in the energy portfolio moving forward. Our second speaker was Dr. Zilberman from the University of California, Berkeley, and he explained that biofuels have been shown to have a modest impact on replacing biofuels. He concluded from a meta-analysis that biofuels created a moderate increase in food commodity prices and a small reduction in fuel prices. And while first-generation biofuels did not yield much benefit to the environment, they did have an impact on the macroeconomy, where they have a larger impact on short-run prices than long-term prices, and they impact rural development, where he saw a small positive net effect on the U.S. welfare. And in the future of biofuels, we see a coevolution of first and second-generation biofuels that should be led by genetic technologies, as well as changes in policy and continued learning by doing. Our third speaker was Coleman Jones from General Motors. And he said that in terms of sustainability and transportation for American consumers, GM offers 2 paths for improving our fuel use. First, they have electric cars, and they're making efficiency improvements with every model. And however, this market is not growing as fast because of consumer demand is very low. Secondly, they are making non-electric cars more efficient in many ways. They have lighter frames, improving drag, and many other features. However, GM has research focused on engine and fuel efficiency. To enable higher engine efficiency, engines need to adapt to new fuel molecules that are being developed, such as the ETBE molecule. These new fuels are aimed at having lower greenhouse gas emissions, and right now the molecule research is outpacing the engine research, but we'll have more options in the future. And for now, into the next few decades, internal combustion cars are going to be dominating the market. So takeaways from this session is that bioenergy does have a place in the energy portfolio, whether it is first or second generation. First generation has proven to have an impact, but second generation biofuels have the capacity for climate regulation. And in the current state of the fuel industry and the use of fuel transportation, it needs to shift, and we need to see more renewable market development. And we do need to consider the impact biofuels and fuel use will have on the economic, social, environmental, and climatic scales. And policies for the industry and for the markets will be key moving forward into the future for sustainable fuel use. Thank you.
Well, hello, good afternoon. My name is Matheus Souza. I'm going to be talking about a few points that I thought were interesting about session 3, which is titled Reducing the Carbon Footprint of Energy Services. Our first speaker, Dr. Jones from Berkeley, he presented his very interesting work in behavioral interventions aimed at conserving energy. What stood out for me, the most important point that he told us is that actually, contrary to what some might believe, monetary incentives may not be the main drivers of energy conservation, but actually more a sense of creating a community, like an effort to create communities that wish to improve their quality of life or to make an environmental statement might actually have a bigger impact on energy conservation. Our second speaker, Dr. Thoman from the World Bank, he reinforces the importance of RD&D for technologies for decarbonization. And he also points out that there must be international cooperation for this, maybe in terms of forming technology clubs in which there would be open access technologies which promotes diffusion of all of this knowledge. And maybe different countries, depending on their specializations, could focus on different aspects of the problem. And our third speaker, Dr. Myers, she first started talking about the energy efficiency paradox, in which apparently there are some low-hanging fruit in terms of investments in efficiency, meaning that apparently in the long run, some of these investments might actually be saving us money because of the energy conservation. But actually, in some contexts, it has been shown that these investments have not been taken up. These technologies have not been taken up. So there has been a recent effort in the economics literature, at least, to try to understand why not. And Dr. Myers, in this context, reinforces the importance of ex-post calculations of actual energy savings, rather than relying on only projected savings to guide our policy making. And the two main ideas that I thought were present in all of these three presentations. First one is that energy conservation requires cooperation across people from different fields and maybe even different nations. And secondly, we must adequately tailor all of these policies to their specific context. For example, low-income or developing countries may have different incentives rather than the already developed countries. So thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Cecilia Klauber, and I'm from the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And I'll be giving the overview on the fourth session, which was about integrating renewable resources into the grid. So our first speaker was, David Nickel, and he is from the Department of Electrical Engineering as well, here at the university. And so his emphasis was on how some of these new technologies, renewable resources included, can introduce more opportunities for those with evil intent to try and get into the grid and affect it. So these new technologies give us as researchers an opportunity to look into some new risk assessment and, for him specifically, cyber protection related research. The second speaker was Tom Overby, also from the University of Illinois and my home department, Electrical Engineering. And his focus was on challenges that we have as power engineers with controlling this big machine, the electric power grid. And so he talked specifically about the challenges introduced by wind and solar power. They're very intermittent, and also they don't have any storage, as we heard about this morning as well. And a big thing he studies is transient stability. So after disturbance, the first seconds or so after that, and the lack of inertia, that is a big difference between these renewable sources and some of our traditional sources of energy, is something that gives us a challenge in how do we control and manage and keep the grid stable. The third speaker was Miroslav Begovic from Texas A&M University, and he talked specifically about photovoltaics, solar power in the grid. And so he talked about how the adoption of PV is growing fast and the science is getting better, but there's still room for improvement, especially in technology and in the economics of it. He gave a staggering statistic, something like it takes about 20 years for a solar panel to produce the amount of energy that it takes to produce it and then install it. So things are getting better, but there's still room for improvement. So some of the takeaways from this session: the integration of renewable energy resources introduces new technical challenges. And Tom Overby said it yesterday. He said, us as power engineers, it was a very electrical engineering heavy session. We like that challenge. But I think an important thing that this conference addresses, and that was also brought up in the various presentations, is that effective integration will also require us to engage with those with policy backgrounds, with regulation backgrounds, economics, and also global backgrounds. So all of that, in conclusion, is that the goal of the electrical engineers in the room is to ensure that the power grid remains reliable and resilient. And it'll take us and our technical background and those with other technical and assorted backgrounds to make that happen. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is, my name is Joe Bottini. I'm a first-year graduate student at the University of Illinois in the Department of Nuclear, Plasma, and Radiological Engineering. I graduated from the NPRE department last May, and I'm pursuing a PhD. So I attended the session this morning, session 5, which dealt with nuclear power. So we had 4 speakers at this session. The first speaker was Dr. Hans Gugar, who's the director for INL's Advanced Research Technologies Development Office. We had Dr. Rizwan Uddin, who's a professor in the NPRE department. We had Dr. Martin Freer, who is a professor, or he's the department head at the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Birmingham. And we have Dr. James Stubbins, who is the head of the NPRE department here at the University of Illinois. So the first talk given by Dr. Gugar focused on the current state of nuclear power in the U.S. and in the world. For the U.S., 100% of the power provided by nuclear power is devoted to electricity. It is one of 2 baseload powers, the other being coal. And he focused on the low impact, specifically low impact regarding steel, concrete, and land compared to other sources of power for electricity generation. He also focused on innovative Gen 4 reactor development, whose goals include improved resource management, improved economics, decreased non-proliferation, and cost management, safety. The second presentation had to deal with the comparison of the two baseload power sources, coal and nuclear. One fact that Dr. Udine presented was that the pollution due to coal in China results in a reduction in the life expectancy of 5.5 years, and so he looked at quantifying the two baseload powers, nuclear and coal. Dr. Freer, his presentation focused on the UK's goals with nuclear power associated with their fulfillment of the Kyoto Agreement, that they're planning to reduce their coal power production capabilities along with decommissioning nuclear plants, and how they're looking to expand their nuclear power fleet. And finally, Dr. James Stubbins, he talked about how nuclear currently only contributes to the electricity production within the United States, and he looked at possible alternatives for nuclear power to contribute to transportation along with hydrogen production. So a few takeaways from the nuclear power presentation was that nuclear power offers a sustainable, low-impact source of energy with the potential to expand in efficiency and safety through Gen 4 designs. Nuclear power contributes minimal levels of carbon dioxide while providing valuable baseload electricity that renewables cannot cheaply or reliably provide. And finally, nuclear has a future in energy production with additional designs and broader applications. Thank you.
Okay, hello, my name is William De Vega. I'm a PhD candidate in civil engineering. I'm here to talk about session 6, which was entitled Energy Innovation Frontiers. Our first speaker was Kathy Ayres from Protons On Site. Her talk was on renewable hydrogen production. She provided us with an understanding of the scale of hydrogen generation and therefore its potential impact on decarbonizing the economy. She also provided us with an overview of on-site hydrogen generation technologies in contrast to centralized approaches like steam reforming. And she highlighted that the science to product pipeline takes quite a bit of time because necessary steps like durability testing, manufacturing capability development, and design for safety and code compliance take a lot of time. Then we had Haroon Keshki from ExxonMobil, whose talk was titled Technology and the Low Carbon Transformation. He underlined that a portfolio approach is essential to meet stabilization targets. He demonstrated how nuclear power and carbon capture and storage cannot be neglected in, for example, seeking to meet the targets of RCPs 2.6 and RCPs 4.5. And he noted, however, that the enabling environment for CCS in particular is lacking, with limited progress on legal and regulatory frameworks. Finally, we had Mr. Krish Krishnamurthy from Lind LLC, whose talk was titled Clean Energy Technologies by Lind. He provided us with a comprehensive overview of Lind technology solutions all through the value chain, and all these are focused on addressing the energy trilemma of cost, energy security, and environmental protection. 3 quick takeaways. Transformation of our energy system will span the entire economy. We cannot focus on only transportation and electricity. Consequently, we need synergistic technologies and integrated solutions. For example, some interesting illustrations were provided by the coupling of the need for renewable hydrogen production with the need for energy storage with intermittent renewables. And also, being unconstrained by time and business imperatives, academia must continue to provide the deeper fundamental understandings for these components. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Alessia Savchenko. I am a graduate student at the University of Illinois here, getting a PhD in agricultural and applied economics. I will provide a summary of the last session. I think most of you have been here for the last session, so I'll try to be brief. I think the presenters really provided a wealth of information about renewable energy, from economic and policy and technological perspectives, and I have very much enjoyed the session. The first presenter, Professor Metcalf from Tufts University, talked a lot about the instruments, market-based instruments such as Pigouvian tax, emission reduction targets, revenue targets, and political targets. Professor Madhu Khanna here at University of Illinois talked more about renewable energy policies and different standards that are currently going on and their potential to actually achieve some of the reductions in greenhouse gases that we want to see in the future. And the last speaker, George Gross, also from the University of Illinois, from the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, talked about some of the technology issues that we need to overcome to make renewable energy possible, and one of them, storage, which is critical for flexibility and supply-demand issues as we integrate renewable energy into the grid. So I would like to provide some really brief summary of the session and some takeaways. First of all, one of the big trends is that renewable energy is growing and is growing dramatically. However, what we've heard in the session, we're still having a large dependence on fossil fuels, and percentage-wise, renewable energy is not that big in the total consumption of energy. There are a lot of scattered sector, regional, and state standards that are going on, and together they actually may provide more of a modest reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And among the standards that are currently going on, State Renewable Portfolio Standard and Clean Power Plan seem to be most promising in terms of how much greenhouse gas reduction they can achieve. We need certain investments in advanced biofuels that could lead to potentially larger reductions in greenhouse gases. And together, the net cost of these renewable energy policies are lower than the social cost of carbon. However, there are some negative impacts on certain sectors, for example, like oil sector or coal sectors. There are a lot of challenges in designing and implementing effective market-based instruments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As I already mentioned, there is a variety of instruments, among them Pigouvian tax, various targets, reduction targets. However, they each have a lot of challenges in implementation, and particularly effective implementation. We heard about the mezzanine approach that could be effective in implementing, where the tax is allowed to grow. In this approach, there is implementation of transitional assistance and rebates that gives sort of back the revenue to households so that revenue neutral reform is achieved. Success of achieving substantial reductions in greenhouse gases really critically depends on policy implementation and technical advances that include energy storage. And we do need coordinated policy efforts and have a mix of carbon taxes and low carbon fuel policy. We need tax reform to enhance efficiency and greater investments in R&D. And although current electricity grid has limited storage capacity, but it's critical that we grow that storage capacity to continue to integrate renewable energy into the grid. I think that's about it. Thank you.
That was fantastic. I feel like we've been drinking from a fire hose for the last day and a half, and you guys just did a spectacular job of bringing it all back and synthesizing it for us. So with that, I'd like to bring this third annual Congress, iSEE Congress, to a close. I'd like to finish up with just a few acknowledgments. The organizing committee, under the leadership of Associate Director of iSEE, Madhu Khanna, was Bruce Elliott Litchfield, Tom Overby, Rizwan Uddin, and Stephen Long. We also attracted support from, or had contributed support from, the Office of Public Engagement and the Center for Global Studies at the University of Illinois. And last but absolutely not least, I really want to thank the staff of iSEE for orchestrating this entire Congress: Jenny Cocchini, Tony Mancuso, Amy Rosenberry, and Olivia Harris. Let's give them a big round of applause. Be safe, and thank you.